Climate change is the defining force of our time. We have no more than the prime of your working life in mind to come together as a species to right our wrongs, which begins with seeing our deranged modern worldview for what it is. Now, proponents of the modern industrial extraction economy have said such an economy is like a rising tide. It floats all boats. But my experience of ever-rising tides is that they flood cities. There's such thing as a bad metaphor. The peddlers of this bad metaphor couldn't see they were confusing ebb and flow with proper flooding, but more later on foresight and vision. Let us not confuse promises of shared advantage with the more likely prospects of peril. Everyone in this room, myself included, is a beneficiary of a fraudulent system. Our wealth is a con taken from the silent majority of future generations. By harvesting ancient sunlight in the form of decomposed plant matter and burning it in the form of fossil fuels like oil and natural gas, we will commit the categorical error of turning a figure of speech, burning it like there's no tomorrow, into a statement of fact. There will be no tomorrow. Ironically, by clinging to the comfort and luxury we crave, we are divorcing ourselves from the security we have known and so much want to last forever. Now, business types attempting to bring ideals into line will sometimes say, sure, but we need to be realistic. To which author David Orr says, in reality, the bottom line is we will pay for sustainability whether we want to or not. Ecological responsibility should not be a countercultural act. So how is it that we so much avoid the task of confronting climate change? How is it that when we look into the proverbial mirror, we can't face reality and accept it's time to get in shape? How is it that we won't alter our economic system so it reflects reality? I'll offer two reasons. First, we're looking in the mirror, but we're not seeing everything. We're terribly nearsighted. The medical term for nearsightedness is myopia. But the problem isn't so much that we are, culturally speaking, myopic, but that we love our myopia. Unconsciously, in our myopic gaze, we smile as much as we squint because we have made our distorted worldview absurdly profitable and immensely comforting. Nearsightedness is short-sightedness. Myopia can only concern itself with what is in hand or in reach. It focuses on the next step but has no sense of the horizon. And the future? Well, it's a blur. Short-sightedness fuels our fixation with quarterly earnings, quick fixes, and easy money. In short, short-sightedness is a problem. Our myopia is an error of scope made viable only by the force of convention, because when everybody is short-sighted, short-sightedness isn't short-sighted anymore. The shared deficiency of the populace has made the formerly inadequate now completely sufficient. That said, I don't think our collective myopia is our greatest problem. It's a short-sighted worldview that can be corrected. There's nothing fundamentally paradoxical or mystifying about it. It's just the urge for instant gratification that keeps us focused on the wrong things. But I would like to look at a second cause for our inaction that I find paradoxical and therefore more problematic. If our myopia is an error of scope, perspective, and convention, the paradox that follows is an error of spirit. I call it the paradox of despair. I think a lot of people, at best, say they're worried about climate change, having caught its shape at the edge of the reflection, but at heart, we are resigned to it. They don't feel they can do anything about it beyond shouldering some guilt and toting a reusable bag and water bottle. Many feel powerless to combat the global, political, and technological forces advancing climate change. So some of us despair and come to find, paradoxically and surprisingly, myopically that is, because hey, didn't see it coming, this despair feels kind of good. There is a liberation in despair. When I despair, I ain't got to change nothing. I think a lot of us are relieved to despair, believing that our fate is sealed, that species are going to die, that fish populations will collapse, that already marginalized nations will be sunk by rising seas. The beauty of despair is that we can wallow in our powerlessness and continue doing the same damage we've been doing. By claiming powerlessness to make real change, I can just keep on. By claiming powerlessness, I don't have to be thoughtful. By claiming powerlessness, I can seize the day. Because what's it matter? Be greedy? Sure. It doesn't matter. We are liberated to feel entirely comfortable with the destructive lifestyle, investments, and economic systems that are changing the chemistry of our atmosphere, trashing the oceans, and robbing future generations of what dreams may come. Now, at this point of the talk, a talk that is about ideas worth sharing, you might be wondering if despair is all I'm up to. I hope not. Unfortunately, after the hedonism runs out of gas, the paradox of despair ends in despair. So I have a counter paradox to offer, which is why I'm here and what I'd like to share. The paradox of sacrifice. If the paradox of the liberation of despair frees people to wallow in and get rich from digging up the past in the form of coal, natural gas, and crude oil, the paradox of sacrifice frees people to take hold of the meaning of life and claim the future. Sacrifice is the organizing principle of the universe. Life comes from death. We've seen the movies. You learn to fly by letting go. Athletes and artists know you can only find the performance state of flow by no longer seeking it. At the end of many of my classes, I offer a number of different sayings, aphorisms, and benedictions. One of my favorite, because it assaults our sense of life and meaning, but honors the paradox of sacrifice, is this one. May you find yourself in harm's way. I had a student named George who really struggled with this one, though he didn't struggle with it in the way I'd hoped. He asked me at the end of class one day, "Mr. Peterson, what's that thing you say, I hope you fail?" No, George, it's I hope you find yourself in harm's way. Oh, yeah. How are they different? Okay, so George, he hadn't realized that in this world, the crucible of risk and sacrifice are what make us, where self-revelation and epiphany lie. We find ourselves in the moment of doubt, in the abyss between can and cannot, the abysmal moment of transformative despair, where we move from doubt to hope, from fear to action, from uncertainty to necessity. We find ourselves in harm's way because when we risk losing our security and status, we find what really matters. The universe was born of an explosion of pent-up possibilities so great that we are still experiencing its promise and potential. We are the life from that brokenness, that universal quaking, the great awakening. We are the living, broken bits of that big and original bang. Understood through the paradox of sacrifice, how do you make something new? You let something die. When is tomorrow? Only and forever after today. There's a poem I love by Robert Frost called In Hardwood Groves that speaks to the cycle of life and the organizing principle of sacrifice that governs our universe and life on Earth. The same leaves over and over again. They fall from giving shade above to make one texture of faded brown and fit the earth like a leather glove. Before the leaves can mount again to fill the trees with another shade, they must go down past things coming up. They must go down to the dark decay. They must be pierced by flowers and put beneath the feet of dancing flowers. However it is in some other world, I know that this is the way in ours. The confidence and resignation Frost poses is of a different kind, and one to learn to live by, since it is how life makes its way to us and us to it. I once asked my students what the purpose of education is. And one of my students, who could feel math in her bones as much as in her head, said as soulfully as she said it matter-of-factly, the purpose of education is to learn to love. The purpose of education is to learn to live well on earth and with one another, to learn and love our place in the community of life. Put another way, the purpose of life and education is community. Community is not a commodity, not a slogan. Our great work is learning our place in the community of life, and community is the hardest work there is. Learning community is the work of sacrifice. Learning community is seeing and tearing down walls, building bridges, building resilience, and finding capacity. Educator Kurt Hahn, who founded Model United Nations and the United World Colleges, said, "We have yet to devise a moral equivalent to war." Friends, the moral counterpoint to war is the sacrificial community.
The same piece over and over again.
Learned in communities of service. The time is right to learn life's work. We have heard great things said today from so many, and more to come. The students in Ditto and the parents of CISHK know these will be defining years for you, for us, for all. Open the paper, it's apparent, whether you need glasses or not. Whether our work is to cut our carbon footprint at school and in Hong Kong to preserve forests or protect biodiversity, I humbly look forward to working with you and digging in. In closing, I'll offer you a riff on something I often say to my students at the end of class. May you find and fashion community to inspire and instill the courage, clarity, and compassion to love, listen, and learn as you must. Thank you.